Spring evening, May 22nd, 1959, approximately 7:45 p.m. The Red Rooster Restaurant, corner of 138th Street and 7th Avenue, Harlem, New York. Bumpy Johnson sits at his usual corner, a white cloth napkin tucked into his collar, cutting into a perfectly cooked ribeye steak, medium rare, the way he always orders it. A glass of bourbon sits to his right, two ice cubes melting slowly in the amber liquid. Jazz plays softly from the jukebox in the corner. Miles Davis, So What? Behind him, barely 3 feet away, his bodyguard Willie the Rock Jackson stands perfectly still, his massive frame casting a shadow across the red velvet wallpaper. Willie's right hand moves slowly, deliberately, toward the concealed .45 automatic under his jacket. 15 feet away, at a table near the front window, a man sits alone. He's wearing an expensive gray suit, Italian silk, probably cost $300. His hands rest flat on the table. He's not eating, he's not drinking. He's just sitting there, staring at Bumpy. This man is Tommy the Butcher Eboli, Vito Genovese's most trusted enforcer, the most feared killer in the Genovese crime family. And he's here for one reason. The other 23 people in the restaurant can feel it. The waiters are moving slower. The conversations at nearby tables have dropped to whispers. Even the dishwasher in the kitchen has stopped clanging pots. Everyone knows what's happening here, even if they don't know the details. But here's the thing. Here's what makes this moment different from every other mob confrontation that happened in 1959 New York. Bumpy Johnson already knew Tommy Eboli was coming. He knew exactly why Eboli was here. He knew who sent him, and he'd already decided exactly how this was going to end. What happened in the next 47 minutes didn't just save Bumpy's life. It proved why Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was the only man in Harlem that the five families of the Italian mafia truly feared. Not because of violence, not because he had more guns or more soldiers, because he was smarter than every single one of them. This is that story. But before we dive in, if you want to hear more untold stories about the real kings of Harlem, hit that subscribe button right now. We're bringing you stories that the history books left out. Now let's get back to that restaurant. Tommy the Butcher Eboli wasn't just another mob enforcer. At 38 years old in 1959, he was Vito Genovese's personal problem solver. When someone owed money and refused to pay, Tommy collected. When someone testified against the family, Tommy made sure they never made it to court. When someone needed to disappear, Tommy made them vanish. The New York Police Department had suspected Tommy Eboli of 11 murders. They couldn't prove a single one. That's how good he was. Clean, professional, efficient. Vito Genovese didn't send men like Tommy Eboli to deliver messages. He sent Tommy when he wanted someone dead. So what was Tommy doing in Harlem, sitting in a restaurant, staring at Bumpy Johnson? 3 weeks earlier, a shipment of heroin had disappeared from a Genovese family warehouse in the South Bronx. Not a small shipment. We're talking about $450,000 worth of pure heroin in 1959. In today's money, that's roughly $4.7 million. The kind of loss that starts wars. The warehouse was on Westchester Avenue, third building from the corner, a legitimate produce distribution company on paper. 5 armed guards worked in shifts. The warehouse had steel doors, reinforced locks, the whole setup. On the night of April 28th, someone walked right past all that security and took 47 kilograms of uncut heroin. Vito Genovese was furious, not just because of the money, because it was disrespectful. Someone had the nerve to steal from him. And in Genovese's world, disrespect was worse than theft. Genovese's intelligence network did what it always did. They asked questions, leaned on informants, followed the money. And every trail, every whisper, every rumor led back to one place, Harlem, which meant it led back to one man, Bumpy Johnson. To Genovese, the logic was simple. Nothing moved through Harlem without Bumpy knowing about it. If $450,000 worth of heroin showed up in Harlem, Bumpy either took it or gave permission for someone else to take it. Either way, Bumpy was responsible. So Genovese made a decision. He called Tommy Eboli into his office in Greenwich Village, told him to go to Harlem, find Bumpy, get the heroin back, or get revenge. Genovese didn't care which. But here's what Vito Genovese didn't know. Here's what Tommy Aboli didn't know as he sat in that restaurant, watching Bumpy cut his steak. Bumpy Johnson didn't take that heroin. Three Puerto Rican brothers from East Harlem took it. Ramon, Carlos, and Hector Ayala. They'd been building their own operation for the past 6 months, trying to muscle into the drug trade. They were smart enough to hit a Genovese warehouse. They were stupid enough to try to sell the product through Harlem without asking permission from Bumpy first. Bumpy knew about them, had known for weeks. His network of informants, street dealers, numbers runners, they told him everything that happened in Harlem. When Ramon Ayala tried to sell 2 kilos to one of Bumpy's dealers on Lenox Avenue, word got back to Bumpy within 4 hours. But here's the genius of it. Bumpy didn't stop them, didn't confront them, didn't take the heroin. He just watched, waited, and collected information. Because Bumpy understood something that most gangsters never learn. Sometimes the smartest move is to do nothing. Let your enemies make mistakes. Let situations develop. Then strike when you can solve multiple problems at once. The Ayala brothers had been a headache for 6 months. They were undercutting Bumpy's numbers operation in East Harlem. They'd robbed 2 of his legitimate businesses, a barbershop on 125th Street and a dry cleaning operation on Lexington Avenue. They'd even beaten up one of Bumpy's collection runners, a 19-year-old kid named Jerome who ended up with a broken jaw and couldn't work for 3 weeks. Bumpy wanted them gone. But if he moved against them directly, he'd start a war with the East Harlem Puerto Rican gangs. That meant bodies in the street, police attention, federal attention. Everybody loses in that situation. So when Bumpy found out the Ayala brothers stole from Genovese, he saw an opportunity. Let the Italians think whatever they want to think. Let them send their enforcer. Then use that enforcer to solve his problem and theirs. But that required something most men don't have. The ability to sit calmly in a restaurant, eating a steak with a professional killer 15 feet away, and play the situation perfectly. Willie the Rock Jackson had been Bumpy's bodyguard for 7 years. Before that, Willie served 2 tours in Korea. He had a Bronze Star for valor and a permanent scar across his left shoulder blade from a Chinese bayonet. The man had faced death. He knew what it looked like. And right now, at 7:47 p.m. in the Red Rooster Restaurant, death had just walked through the front door. Willie recognized Tommy Aboli the moment he entered, not because they had ever met, but because Willie made it his business to know every major player in New York's underworld. Aboli's photograph had been in the Daily News 3 months earlier, a trial for racketeering that ended in a hung jury. Willie never forgot a face. He watched Aboli scan the restaurant, his eyes moving methodically from table to table until they locked on Bumpy. Then Aboli walked to the table by the window. Sat down with his back to the wall. The waiter approached. Aboli waved him away. Willie's hand moved slowly toward the .45 automatic tucked in his shoulder holster. He didn't draw it, not yet, just positioned his hand so he could draw and fire in under 2 seconds if needed. Tommy Aboli sat with his hands flat on the table, his right hand about 6 inches from the bulge under his left arm. A .38 revolver, probably. Maybe a 9mm. Definitely something. The temperature in the restaurant changed. It's hard to explain if you've never felt it, but there's a specific kind of tension that fills a room when 2 armed men are deciding whether to kill each other. The air gets heavier. Time slows down. Every sound becomes sharper. The clink of silverware, the scrape of a chair, someone clearing their throat. The couple at table 4 stopped talking mid-sentence. The waiter carrying a tray of drinks to table 7 suddenly decided he needed to go back to the kitchen. The piano player, a 65-year-old man named Chester, who'd been playing at the Red Rooster for 20 years, stopped in the middle of Autumn Leaves. Everyone was waiting to see what Bumpy Johnson would do. And Bumpy did the most unexpected thing possible. He kept eating his steak, cut a piece, chewed it slowly, took a sip of bourbon, dabbed his mouth with his napkin, cut another piece. He didn't look at Tommy Aboli, didn't acknowledge him, didn't change his expression at all. To anyone watching, Bumpy Johnson might as well have been alone in the restaurant, enjoying a quiet dinner on a Thursday evening. But inside his mind, Bumpy was calculating. He had 3 options. First option, leave immediately. Walk out the back door, get in his car, disappear into Harlem. Survive today, deal with tomorrow later. But that was a coward's move. Word would spread. Bumpy Johnson ran from Tommy Aboli. In this world, reputation is everything. He'd lose respect. People would think he was weak. Weak meant vulnerable. Vulnerable meant dead. Second option, strike first. Willie could drop Eboli before the man reached his weapon. Bumpy had no doubt about that. Willie was faster than he looked. But killing Eboli meant war with the Genovese family. Vito Genovese would send 10 men to replace Tommy, then 20, then 50. You can't win a numbers war when the other side has unlimited soldiers. Third option, control the room. Change the dynamic. Turn this confrontation into something else entirely. Bumpy chose option 3. He raised his right hand, snapped his fingers twice. The waiter, a thin man named Marcus who'd worked at the Red Rooster for 15 years, approached nervously. "Marcus," Bumpy said, his voice calm, conversational. "Bring another steak, medium rare, and another bourbon neat for my guest." Marcus's eyes went wide. "Sir?" "You heard me." Marcus nodded quickly and hurried toward the kitchen. Then Bumpy did something that made Willie's heart rate spike. He stood up, napkin still tucked in his collar, bourbon glass in his left hand, and he walked directly toward Tommy Eboli's table. The entire restaurant held its breath. Willie's hand fully gripped his weapon now, thumb on the safety. If Eboli moved wrong, if his hand even twitched toward that bulge under his jacket, Willie would fire. Consequences be damned. Bumpy reached Eboli's table, stood there for 3 seconds, looking down at the enforcer. Eboli looked up, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. "Tommy," Bumpy said like they were old friends meeting at a social club, "I ordered you a steak, medium rare, and a bourbon. Come sit with me. We should talk." This was the moment. Tommy Eboli had killed men for showing less disrespect than Bumpy just showed by approaching him first. In mob protocol, when an enforcer comes to your territory, you wait, you acknowledge their power. You let them dictate the terms. Bumpy just flipped the entire script. Tommy Eboli stared at Bumpy Johnson for what felt like a full minute, but was probably closer to 10 seconds. His right hand stayed exactly where it was, 6 inches from his weapon. His face showed nothing. No anger, no surprise, no respect. Then slowly, Tommy stood. He was 3 inches shorter than Bumpy, but built like a linebacker. Thick shoulders, thick neck, hands that looked like they could crush walnuts. He followed Bumpy back to the corner table, walking with the careful, balanced stride of a man who's always ready to fight. Willie stayed where he was, behind Bumpy's chair, hands still on his weapon. As Eboli sat down across from Bumpy, Willie's eyes never left the enforcer's right hand. The waiter, Marcus, appeared with a second steak in the bourbon. His hands were shaking so badly the glass rattled against the plate. He set everything down, stepped back, and practically ran toward the kitchen. Bumpy picked up his fork and knife, cut another piece of his steak, chewed slowly. "Eat first," Bumpy said, his tone casual, almost friendly. "Business later." Tommy Eboli looked at the steak, then at Bumpy, then back at the steak. In the mob world, sharing a meal means something. It means you're willing to sit together, talk, find common ground. It's a temporary peace offering, but Tommy had been sent here to kill a man, or at least deliver a message that would likely end in killing. Sitting down to eat together complicated that mission. Still, Eboli picked up his fork, cut a piece of steak, his right hand stayed near his waistband the entire time. Ready. Bumpy started talking, not about heroin, not about the Genovese family, not about any of the reasons Tommy was actually sitting there. Instead, Bumpy talked about jazz, about how Miles Davis was changing the entire sound of modern music, about the new highway construction that was tearing through the Bronx, displacing thousands of families, about Jackie Robinson retiring from baseball and what that meant for the Brooklyn Dodgers. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Tommy Eboli ate his steak, drank his bourbon, and said almost nothing, just grunted occasionally, nodded it a few times, kept his eyes on Bumpy, watching for any sign of fear, any sign of weakness. The tension in the restaurant didn't decrease. If anything, it got worse. Because everyone was waiting for the conversation to shift, waiting for the real reason Tommy Eboli was there to finally come out into the open. 20 minutes after they sat down, Bumpy pushed his empty plate aside, took the napkin from his collar, folded it carefully and set it on the table. Then he leaned back in his chair, picked up his bourbon glass, and finally said what everyone had been waiting to hear. "You came here to kill me," Bumpy said. His voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. Tommy Eboli stopped chewing, set down his fork. His right hand moved 2 inches closer to his waistband. Willie's thumb clicked off the safety on his .45. "Vito sent you," Bumpy continued, "because of that shipment that disappeared from the warehouse on Westchester Avenue. 450,000 worth of heroin, 47 kilograms, gone like smoke." Bumpy took a sip of bourbon, let the moment hang there. "You were supposed to come here, ask me where it is, and if I didn't give you a satisfactory answer, you were supposed to put 2 bullets in my chest. Then you were supposed to call Vito and tell him the problem was handled." Tommy Eboli's face remained expressionless, but his eyes showed something, surprise maybe, or respect, because everything Bumpy just said was exactly accurate. Word for word, that was Vito Genovese's instruction. "How do you—" Tommy started. "I know," Bumpy interrupted, "because I would have done the same thing. It's smart. It's logical. Someone steals from you, you make an example. Otherwise, everyone thinks they can steal from you. That's how you lose power." Bumpy set down his bourbon glass, looked directly into Tommy's eyes. "But here's the thing, Tommy, I didn't take Vito's heroin." Tommy's jaw tightened. Everyone says a lot of things." Bumpy cut him off again. "Most of it's wrong." Bumpy reached into his jacket pocket. Willie tensed. Tommy's hand went fully to his weapon. But Bumpy just pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and slid it across the table. 3 names were written on the paper, along with 3 addresses. Ramon Ayala, 2247 East 116th Street, apartment 3C. Carlos Ayala, 2247 East 116th Street, apartment 3C. Hector Ayala, 2247 East 116th Street, apartment 3C. Below the names, Bumpy had written additional information. Warehouse location, 3 to 12 East 116th Street, rear building, basement level. Guards, 2 men, 8 p.m., 8 a.m. chef, safe location, northeast corner, behind false wall panel safe combination, 142730. Tommy stared at the paper, then at Bumpy, then back at the paper. "The Ayala brothers took Vito's heroin," Bumpy said. "They're holding it in that warehouse. Right now, as we're sitting here, they're cutting it with powdered milk and baby laxative, getting ready to sell it in East Harlem. They'll have about 380,000 worth left after what they have already moved." Bumpy leaned forward. His voice dropped lower, more intense. "You bring that back to Vito. You tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him 3 small-time operators tried to play in the big leagues, and Bumpy Johnson gave them up to make things right." Tommy Eboli picked up the piece of paper, read it again, slowly, looked at the addresses, the names, the guard schedule, the safe combination. All the details were there, everything needed to recover the heroin. But Tommy wasn't stupid. Nobody stays alive in the mob by being stupid. And this whole situation felt too easy, too clean, too convenient. He looked up at Bumpy. "Why are you giving them up?" This was the question Bumpy had been waiting for, because this is where he would show Tommy, and by extension, Vito Genovese, exactly how smart he really was. "Because," Bumpy said, "those 3 brothers have been a problem for me for 6 months." He signaled Marcus for another bourbon, waited while the waiter brought it, then continued. "The Ayala brothers showed up in East Harlem last October. Started small, sold marijuana to kids outside the high school, ran a dice game on 117th Street. Nothing that concerned me, but then they got ambitious." Bumpy took a drink. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. "They started undercutting my numbers operation, offering better odds, trying to pull my runners away. Then they robbed one of my barbershops, took 300 from the register and slapped around the barber when he tried to stop them. Then they hit my dry cleaning place on Lexington. Then they put one of my collection runners in the hospital with a broken jaw. Tommy listened, his expression neutral. I wanted them gone, Bumpy continued. But here's the problem. Those three brothers, Russian, have connections. Their uncle runs one of the major Puerto Rican gangs in East Harlem. Their cousin controls the dock workers union on the west side. If I move against the Ayala brothers directly, I'm not just dealing with three guys. I'm starting a war with every Puerto Rican operation from 96th Street to the Bronx. Bumpy spread his hands on the table like he was laying out all his cards. That's a war I'd probably win, but it would cost me. Bodies in the street, police investigations, federal attention. My operations would take a hit for 6 months, maybe longer. I'd lose money. I'd lose men. And for what? To punish three idiots who stole 300 from a barbershop? Tommy was beginning to understand. You could see it in his eyes. The calculation, the recognition of strategy. But then, Bumpy said, a slight smile crossing his face, they stole from Vito Genovese, and suddenly my problem became an opportunity. He picked up the piece of paper from the table, tapped it with his finger. You go to that warehouse on 116th Street. You bring 6 or 7 good men. You hit it tomorrow night around midnight when the brothers are all there counting their money. You take back Vito's heroin. And what happens to the Ayala brothers in the process? Bumpy shrugged. That's between you and them. He leaned back in his chair. You get your heroin back. Vito gets his $380,000. I get my problem solved. And nobody, not the Puerto Rican gangs, not the police, not anybody, can blame me for what happened. Because it wasn't my operation. It was yours. Tommy Eboli sat there processing all of this, and slowly, very slowly, understanding the full picture. This wasn't just about the heroin. This was about something much bigger. By giving up the Ayala brothers, Bumpy was proving he didn't take the heroin in the first place. Why would he give it back if he stole it? That would be stupid. So this action cleared Bumpy's name with the Genovese family. But more than that, by knowing exactly where the heroin was, by knowing the guard schedule, by knowing the safe combination, by having all this detailed intelligence, Bumpy was demonstrating something even more important. His information network was better than the five families' intelligence operations. He knew things they didn't know. He had sources they couldn't access. He controlled Harlem in a way they never could. And by offering this information freely, without negotiation, without asking for anything in return, Bumpy was showing he wasn't afraid of Vito Genovese. He was showing confidence, power, the kind of quiet, strategic power that's more dangerous than an army of soldiers. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a demonstration. Tommy Eboli, a man who'd killed 11 people and intimidated hundreds more, suddenly realized he was sitting across from someone who operated on a completely different level. Violence was easy. Any idiot could pull a trigger. But this, solving 4 problems at once, strengthening your position with your enemies, eliminating your competitors without firing a shot, this was genius. Tommy stood up. Slowly, he picked up the piece of paper, folded it, and put it in his jacket pocket. Then he extended his right hand across the table. Bumpy stood and shook it. Firm grip, eye contact. 2 professionals acknowledging each other's capabilities. Tell Vito I said hello, Bumpy said. Tommy nodded. I will. He turned and walked toward the exit. His hand wasn't near his weapon anymore. The tension had evaporated. As he pushed through the door and disappeared into the Harlem night, the restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. Willie finally took his hand off his .45, stood there shaking his head slightly. In 7 years of protecting Bumpy Johnson, he'd seen a lot of close calls. But this was something else entirely. Bumpy sat back down, signaled Marcus for another bourbon. When it arrived, he took a long, slow drink. Then he picked up his fork and ate the last few bites of steak from Tommy Eboli's abandoned plate. Medium rare, still warm, perfectly cooked. If you're enjoying this story, do me a favor, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching this from. I really want to know where Bumpy's story is reaching. And hey, while you're down there, what would you have done in this situation? take the steak dinner meeting, or handle it differently? Let's discuss in the comments. 36 hours later, on the night of May 24th, 1959, 7 armed men from the Genovese crime family entered a warehouse at 3112 East 116th Street. They came through the front door and the back door simultaneously, professional and coordinated. The 2 guards never had a chance to draw their weapons. Ramon, Carlos, and Hector Ayala were in the basement, counting their money. They just finished cutting another kilo of heroin, getting it ready for distribution. When they heard footsteps on the stairs, Ramon grabbed a shotgun. Carlos pulled a .38 revolver. Hector ran for the back exit. The gunfight lasted about 90 seconds. When it was over, all 3 Ayala brothers were dead. The Genovese men recovered 38 kilograms of heroin from the safe in the northeast corner, exactly where Bumpy said it would be. They also found $87,000 in cash, money from what the brothers had already sold. Tommy Eboli personally drove the heroin back to Vito Genovese's compound in New Jersey. When he arrived, just after 3 a.m., Genovese was still awake, waiting in his study. Tommy gave him the full report: the warehouse hit, the dead brothers, the recovered product, the cash. Then Tommy told him about the dinner, about how Bumpy Johnson had given them everything, about the piece of paper with the addresses and the safe combination. Vito Genovese sat there for a long moment, processing this information. Then he picked up his phone. It was 3:30 in the morning, but he called Bumpy Johnson's apartment directly. Bumpy answered on the second ring. "Hello? This is Vito. I figured you'd call." There was a pause. Then Genovese said, "Tommy tells me you helped us recover our property." "I did." "You could have kept it or sold the information to someone else." "I could have," Bumpy agreed, "but that would have been short-term thinking. I prefer to build long-term relationships." Another pause. Then Genovese said something that almost never came out of his mouth. "I appreciate what you did. I owe you a favor. If you need anything, you call me directly." In the world of organized crime, those words meant something. A favor from Vito Genovese was currency. It was protection. It was leverage. And Bumpy Johnson had just earned it by giving up 3 Puerto Rican brothers who'd been causing him problems anyway. "I'll remember that," Bumpy said. Genovese hung up. The next morning, word spread through East Harlem about what happened to the Ayala brothers. But here's the thing. Nobody knew Bumpy had anything to do with it. The story was simple. The Ayala brothers stole from the wrong people and paid the price. The Puerto Rican gangs were angry at the Italians, but they couldn't retaliate against the entire Genovese family. So they swallowed their anger and moved on. Bumpy Johnson's hands were completely clean. Perfect deniability. But the real victory, the one that mattered in the long game, was what happened in the weeks and months after that dinner at the Red Rooster. Every major player in New York's underworld heard the story. The details got embellished and exaggerated, the way stories do. But the core truth remained. Bumpy Johnson sat down to dinner with Tommy the Butcher Eboli, the most feared enforcer in the Genovese family, and turned a death sentence into a strategic alliance. He solved 4 problems in one move. He demonstrated intelligence capabilities that the 5 families couldn't match. He built leverage with one of the most powerful mob bosses in the country, and he did it without firing a single shot. That's what separated Bumpy Johnson from every other gangster in New York. Violence is easy. It's simple. Someone disrespects you, you hurt them. Someone threatens you, you hurt them first. It's emotional, reactionary, short-term thinking. But Bumpy understood something deeper. Real power, lasting power, comes from intelligence, from patience, from the ability to see 3 moves ahead while everyone else is focused on the immediate problem. Most men in Bumpy's position would have panicked when Tommy Eboli walked into that restaurant. They would have run or they would have fought. Both options lead to the same place: more violence, more attention, more problems. Bumpy chose a third path. He controlled the situation, changed the dynamics, turned an enemy into a tool, solved his problem while solving their problem, built a relationship while eliminating a threat. That's genius. It's the same principle that guided everything Bumpy Johnson did throughout his career. When Dutch Schultz tried to muscle into Harlem in the 1930s, Bumpy did not fight him head-on. He built alliances with the Italian families and let them handle it. When the police tried to shut down his numbers operation in the 1940s, He didn't fight them. He used political connections and community support to make himself untouchable. When younger gangsters tried to challenge his authority in the 1950s, he didn't eliminate them. He co-opted them, brought them into his organization, turned potential enemies into allies. Information, strategy, patience, long-term thinking. Those were Bumpy Johnson's weapons, and they were more effective than any gun. On May 22, 1959, in a restaurant in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson proved something that every gangster, every mob boss, every would-be king of the streets needed to understand. The smartest man in the room is always more dangerous than the strongest man in the room. Tommy the Butcher, Eboli, walked into that restaurant planning to kill Bumpy Johnson. He walked out as an asset, a tool, a solution to a problem. That's power. That's why, for 40 years, Bumpy Johnson controlled Harlem. Not because he killed more people than anyone else, but because he outsmarted everyone else. So here's my question for you. What would you have done in Bumpy's position? Would you have taken the meeting? Would you have given up those brothers? Or would you have played it differently? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And while you're down there, tell me where in the world you're watching this from. New York, LA, London, Lagos, Tokyo? I want to know where Bumpy Johnson's story is reaching. Leave your city or country in the comments. If you want to hear more stories like this, the real, untold history of Harlem's most brilliant strategist, hit that subscribe button right now. We're diving deep into moments that the history books missed, the strategic genius that changed organized crime in America. Because this wasn't just about one dinner. This was about a lifetime of proving that intelligence beats violence, strategy beats emotion, and patience beats everything. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.